Hey everybody, it's John the Other here, and today is day 2 of, I don't know what we're going to call it, the BC Court Watch, BC Family Court Observation Project. We don't really have a name for it yet, but we'll come up with something. Anyway, today I spent, as yesterday, most of the morning at BC Family Court in North Vancouver, and rather than listening to one particular case which went on all day and one set of testimony, we looked at a whole lot of different cases which were processed by the judge, different judge than yesterday, very quickly. A couple of things to note. Today's judge was a guy who was seemed very friendly and open towards everybody who went through his courtroom. A lot of people were confused, didn't have lawyers, didn't really understand what they were doing, were misfiling and misstating themselves, and he seemed really genuinely there to try to help people mitigate the damage in their lives and sort of get along with each other, stop fighting, sort things out, take a barrel of snakes and straighten them all out. But I'm going to talk about one particular case which was heard today that I was witness to. This is a guy who was probably in his early 50s and was sort of a blue-collar construction worker, heavy labor type of a dude. And you could see it in his physique. He was almost as wide as he was tall. He was built like 4 brick shithouses, and you could see that this was accumulated body mass of doing heavy labor his whole life. He was also more or less lost and confused in the environment of the court, not knowing how to state his case properly, not knowing what his obligations were, not knowing how to, really file a motion properly or what the purpose of any process within the court was for. And this was evidenced by the fact that in a previous session with another judge, he had been barred by the court from filing any more motions. Apparently he'd filed so many motions frivolously and incorrectly that they just said, you're not allowed to file any more motions because you're wasting your time and ours, because these motions are incorrect, you're not doing it right, you don't even understand the process. Today he had that prohibition lifted. The judge granted him leave to file motions. The judge also, in the middle of this session, called duty counsel, which is the court-appointed attorney for defense, called the duty counsel into the courtroom and made sure that these two guys hooked up together so that this guy wouldn't, be instructed, go talk to the duty counsel, and then he'd wander out and never do that. And this guy was so unfamiliar with sort of the protocols of the court that he kind of thanked the duty counsel for coming in and say, oh, you're going to be really helpful, and then as he left, slapped the guy on the butt in a friendly way, but obviously that's not the way you're supposed to get along with people in a court, by slapping them on the butt. Anyway, the thing that I note about him, my personal observation, is that this is a guy in his early 50s. I mean, he's in the second half of his life. He has worked heavy manual labor his entire life. He's probably minimally educated. He had some real serious physical problems, several of which he mentioned during the session. One of which was that he had an abscess on the brain, probably, I will admit, related to drug abuse, because this guy was a drug abuser, at least at some point in his life. There was visible scars on one of his hands, which I think were probably injection sites. He'd been in the hospital, which is why he missed a previous court appointment. He also had totally failed to meet any of his court-mandated obligations, including child support, getting his finances in order, making financial statements to the court about what his income was, and filing any of his paperwork properly. He seemed to be utterly and totally lost. Some of that was probably affected, probably acting more confused than he really was because he hadn't organized himself. But this is a guy who probably doesn't open his mail or his email. And here we have my evaluation of what kind of a guy this is. He's in his late 50s. He's a manual laborer. He's worked heavy-duty work his whole life, and has drug and alcohol problems probably, and has 2 recent kids, 2 young, below the age of 10 children who he's required to pay financial support for. And the obligation on him is, with all your medical problems, with your recent trip in the hospital and your brain problem, he's got an abscess on the brain, and failing health and he's probably on heavy-duty painkillers for all of his physical problems, his number one responsibility is find a way to pay your ex-wife or ex-girlfriend. Not take care of yourself. The court's concern isn't to find a way that this guy's going to be okay. It's find a way for him to make sure somebody else is financially okay. Now, if we had a woman in the court with similar problems to this guy, the brain abscess and the recent trips to the hospital and other problems, pain medication and so on, the court would be moving planets and mountains to make sure that a woman was okay. But for this guy, what the court is doing is with the motivation of making sure he can pay, not to make sure he's okay as a person. This I find really interesting. I think it's, as much as the judge was a very friendly, accommodating guy, we are still working from this ideology where the entire purpose of a man is to be a provider, not to be his own person. Anyway, that's today's observation from, I guess, what is day 2 of BC Family Court Watch. That's the working title. We'll see how it goes from there. This is also a project of community organized compassion and kindness. If you think that what we're doing matters, is important, and should be supported, there is a PayPal button in the description bar of this video. Thanks very much for watching and have a lovely day.